Hello and welcome to the One Life Church devotional series where we cover the entire Bible in 20 months by reading 2 chapters a day. Now, if you haven't started from the beginning with us, no problem. You just hop on exactly where we are now and finish your consecutive 20 months. Our 2 chapters today are Genesis 23 and Acts chapter 9. And if I had to entitle the principal message that I get out of these chapters, it would be the window of heaven. Now, in one sense, the windows of heaven are open over the people of God because the curtain has been torn at the death of Jesus and we have access to God. But in another sense, we are still living in our mortal bodies. We are still yet to see the fullness of the extent of seeing God face to face. And so in another sense, there are moments when heaven breaks in, and a phrase the Bible uses is the windows of heaven. So I've got one of my windows behind me here. The other side of this window are my little pups, my little dogs. And when they see one of my windows open, they jump. So my house has got dog paws on the outside. Why? Because there's an anticipation for the windows of the Crawford household to be open to my little dogs. So in Genesis chapter 23, we can see that the windows of heaven are open over Abraham in the financial arena. Because this chapter is one of those funny chapters where he's haggling with a guy to buy a piece of land, but he's not haggling to drop the price. He's haggling to increase the price. Have you ever had a meal with a guy who says, I want to pay? And then he says, no, I want to pay. I want to pay. I want to pay. And you fight. And the waitress is like looking at you thinking, what's up with these guys wanting to get rid of their money? And so you've got to look at Abraham and say, well, why was he wanting to pay 60,000 rand for a piece of land to bury his wife where he was offered it for free? Well, if you look in the history of Abraham, I remember chapter 13, Lot and him were facing the option of where they were going to live. Abraham says, you choose, but I trust God's going to look after me, because what does he say? The windows of heaven are open over me. Remember, the king of Sodom came to him and wanted to give him all huge envoys of wealth. He says, no, I'm not going to take a cent from you, because I don't want it to ever be said that the king of Sodom has made Abraham rich. That's chapter 14. Again, he just knows that God's windows are open over him. And then in that same chapter, Melchizedek comes and Abraham quite happily gives him 1/10 of everything that he has. Why? Because he understands the windows of heaven are open. Malachi 3:10 puts it this way. It says, test me in this. Bring 1/10 of what you have. Bring your tithes. In other words, declare your faith in me with your finance. Test me in this and see if I will not open the windows of heaven over you. That's what Abraham lived in. Now, Acts chapter 9, we see the windows of heaven open again, but this is in another way. It's for the grace of God to come and save people. So this is the story of Saul getting saved. I mean, Acts chapter 9 has also got amazing miracles that Peter did at the very end, but essentially it's Saul's conversion. And you've got to ask yourself, why on earth was Saul saved? I mean, this guy's just murdered Stephen. This guy's breathing murderous threats. And yet in this chapter it says, and when God speaks to Ananias to say, go pray for that guy, Saul, he is my chosen instrument to preach the gospel. Why was he God's chosen instrument? I mean, the people certainly didn't even believe that it happened to him. And in the early church, it says here in verse 20, at once Paul got up and he began to preach in the synagogues that Jesus was the Son of God. And it says here in verse 22, yet Saul grew more powerful and powerful, baffling the Jews. He baffled the Jews. How can this guy who's a persecutor suddenly be saved? The early church, it says that they were too scared to come and meet him. And this chapter says Barnabas has to go introduce him to the people. Why? Because God opened the windows of heaven over Saul and reached out and saved him. Now, why did he do that? Well, the only clue we have is we go back to Acts chapter 7, and you can see Stephen being killed by Saul. Saul's busy killing Stephen. And this is what Stephen says in Acts chapter 7:53. He says, look, and he's looking upwards. I see the windows of heaven are open. Or he says, I see heaven open and the Son of Man standing there. And so Stephen says, I saw heaven open. Who? Over Paul. You see, when we, in the financial arena, have faith to tithe and to say, God is all yours anyway, the windows of heaven open. When it comes to our enemies, when we have faith to say, God, forgive my enemy, even though he's persecuting me, love him, Lord Jesus, forgive him, hold us not against him, the windows of heaven open over him. The windows of heaven are opened by the hand of God when his saints put their trust in him and their faith in him. God bless you. Have a great day.